Okay, we're in Siman Kuftes. We're up to Vov. We're learning now about the Mayim, the water that's used for the baking. And we established there has to be Mayim Shelonu, which means water that rested overnight. And the problem is because the water that's in the rivers, that's where they used to get the water from, in the wells. So the sun during the day, the sun bakes on it, and overnight, state that the sun goes from under and heats up the water. You know. So therefore, we take water at a time when there's no sun at all, and when the sun is setting, that's by Bein Hashmashos, and we let the water lay for 12 hours, because usually if you there's some bakers maybe that bake today maybe 24 hours also. I mean, depends how busy they are and how big they are. But I could just tell you, like for example, the Lubavitcher bakery over here. So if they take it by Bein Hashmashos, which is now, and they start baking the next morning, I think 8 o'clock. So maybe there is 12 hours. There's no problem. So he says it's like that. We learned before that you have to make sure that the receptacle for the water should be clean. It shouldn't, because and we try to use a glass one because glass doesn't have any absorptions in it. Glass doesn't absorb. So over here he says,
what's the problem if it absorbs?
What?
What's the problem if it absorbs?
So you'll soon see. I'll explain
you
it.
said yesterday already.
No. Let's just learn inside and then I'll explain it. He says, "Layitna bekli shehaya b'dvash, oisham me'pedis." We know that there's 7 liquids that are considered liquid, but there's many. Me'pedis can be for anything. Could be apple juice. Could be. So dvash is also is a liquid, even though it's a thicker liquid, but dvash is a liquid. I'll soon explain why. Not unless he kasha the barrel or the receptacle, and then you could use it. If it had them, or should I say, pickles, and so it's laying the whole time in pickle juice, and that's a double chorav. If the pickle is not chametz. The pickle juice is not chametz. Mishum da'idei double chorav memahel lahachmetz. Bafil hagol lemahani. Even a go wouldn't help. Gam wa yitam b'klina chayshes. She'ena metzanen k'may shar kelim. Let me explain over here the din. There is a din that may pay this is not mechametz. In other words, if you bake matzah and instead of using water, you use, let's say, apple juice. That's a pure apple juice. I'm not talking apple juice that's made with a concentrate. We're not going into that question because then there's a lot of water in it also. But let's say pure apple juice. So the din is that the matzah will not be chametz because may paydas is not mechametz. However, there is a din like this then. If you made it with may paydas and you had water and may paydas, so then the din is that it's mahel lahachmetz. Such water will speed up. So usually we know that when dough lays for 18 minutes, let's say, it becomes chametz, it begins to ferment. It could, if you made it with made paydas and water, then it's from ma'il hachmetz. It could become chametz after, let's say, 15 minutes or 12 minutes. I don't know the shear what it would be. So that's why he says over here that you shouldn't put in any of these things. And the same thing is also if there's a davar chorav. A davar chorav he's saying is that because it could be that a davar chorav, it may not, even if you kasher it, he says, it may not take out everything, So there may still be a little bit that will go into the water, and it'll be sharp water. And it's sharp water is like an acidy type of water, and it'll be memayel hachmetz, even though you're baking with water. That's it. And they said a kappa keli, a cleaner choishes. He says kappa has a teva to heat. So it'll add water it'll add to the warmth of the water, and therefore you shouldn't use a kappa keli. There's even some people have a shaila. I don't want to go into it, but I once about a question about if a thermos is considered, if you're allowed to put water into a thermos. Some hold that a thermos is like a kappa, and so you're not allowed to be timing in before Shabbos in the davar shel Ma'asav Hevel. They hold a kappa is Ma'asav Hevel. But I'm not going to go into the whole details of that halacha. Now it says another din. Imraya, if the baker sees shelo yaspik loy hamayim shelonu, he prepared mayim shelonu, but it turns out that wasn't enough. So there's an interesting din here. Mutter l'hoisef l'toichen sham mashkin. You're allowed to take other water, like turn on the faucet and take water, and pour it into the barrel with this water. But he said the condition. Ubevad sheyiyah harayv mimayim shelonu. But the rayv should be mayim shelonu. And he says, u'chatchila toiv sheyiyah shnei shlish mimayim shelonu. So that's like something like rayv. 2 shlishim and against the 1 is batal b'rayv. So this becomes batal b'rayv, and it's all considered like mayim shelonu. B'yesh l'hadem efshel livshe es ha-mayim shemesifin mitech plump. Plump means a pump. They used to have a pump that you knock the pump down with a handle and water comes up. Or shab ber mechusa she'ein hashemesh bo al ha-mayim. In other words, you shouldn't go to the river to take water, because that river you didn't take from why? But during the day the sun bakes on it. But if it's in a well, so it's underground. So if underground, the sun doesn't have so much the heat of the sun in it. There's a very interesting shaila that they ask on this halacha. The shaila, and it's a machlokes in Poskim, this thing. The shaila is like this: we all remember, but after Farbrengen, where the people washed, the Rebbe would give out kosher bracha. Okay, what was kosher bracha? The Rebbe would bench. He'd fill up, or Rabbi Mentor would fill up his becher with wine, and then later the Rebbe would make Havdalah on it, and after Havdalah, he would sit down and he would drink from it, and that was kosher bracha. But what the Rebbe left in his kais, after he drank from it, he drank the Reiva kais, because he wants to make a bracha achrayna, right? So what happened? They would be standing next to the Rebbe, Rabbi Mentlik or Beryl Eunuch, with a bottle of wine, and they kept pouring wine into the Rebbe's cup. And the Rebbe stood for a few hours, giving out kosher bracha, and I don't know how many gallons of wine were poured into that little cup, and it's considered kosher bracha, right? What's the reason why it's considered kosher bracha? The person that got first from the Rebbe, when it was still maybe the first cup that got filled, no, okay, kosher bracha. But 2 hours later, it's still kosher bracha. Because we have a rule, and the rule is that we say kama bottle. Every drop that you put in goes on top of what's under it, and the meal becomes bottle. So therefore, because of that halacha, that kima bottle, because of that halacha, the kosher bracha was considered kosher bracha throughout the entire night till the Rebbe emptied out the whole kos. So they asked,
That was first one, it's a bracha.
what?
That's a separate issue. He said anytime they ever gave you a bracha. We know that. That's I'm not talking about that. But
I'm talking about halacha, not chassidus, okay? So there's a shaila. Does that same din also apply by the Mayim Shelonu? In other words, over here it says if you ran short from the Mayim Shelonu, so you can add water to it. Now, after you finish that, could you add again 2/3 and say kama bottle, that the first time they did it, and you go on like this a whole day and say kama bottle or not? So it's a shaila in halacha. There's a sefer on Kitzur Shulchan Aruch.
it wouldn't need to be arrived then. Then why do you need shnei shlish?
Because it's bottle barav.
Yeah, but they need this play here every drop immediately. It wouldn't have to
In
be.
a chiram, but that's why we want the rav. It's okay. So 1 minute.
Anyway,
So there's a sefer on Kitzur Shulchan
No, he
Aruch,
said take it from a well. We said that already.
only on Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, called Madani Shmuel.
It's for worms.
It was made by a Rav in Europe years ago. He also made a sefer on Kitzur Shulchan Aruch on Shabbos called Mincha Shabbos, and a sefer on the Dina on the Tiras Yadayim. So he has a whole arichas on this shaila over there. Some say you could do it, some say you can't do it. But the most opinion hold that you can't do it. The question is, why is this different than the kosher bracha example that I gave? And the answer is very simple. The answer is because the kosher bracha, as we say kama bottle, but there always remains a little bit of the original kosher bracha. Mashenkin over here helps with kama bottle, because over here the problem is that you need water that shouldn't be warm. So if you put in the first time, you have 2/3 full, and you added 1/3, so it will not affect the matzah, the third that you added. But when you keep doing it, so then in Metzias,
The water will change temperature.
The water will change temperature. So the rule of kama bottle only applies to the first time and not after that. Okay, let's go further. Kishoifim b'yem rishon, when you bake on Sunday, so you can't. You can't go Shabbos by Bein Hashmosh, because Shabbos Bein Hashmosh it's Shabbos. So he said Kishoifim b'yem rishon tzrichen lishav b'yem hey ba'erev. Ki b'yem erev Shabbos I efshel tzamtzum Bein Hashmoshes. He said erev Shabbos, you have to figure out the Bein Hashmoshes. I mean, what is it? Uveshas atchak v'resho b'yem chamishi yisha be'erev Shabbos la'achar mincha oy v'Shabbos ayidei goy. Now you may ask, and what if you could be mitzamtzum the Bein Hashmoshes? Why should you be permitted? So there is an interesting din. We're not allowed to do malach. But Bein Hashmoshes is like Bein Hashmoshes is the time after Lichbenchen, right? If Moshe after Lichbenchen is Shabbos by us, but there is a din that Issa D'Rabbanan with Tzarech Mitzvah you're allowed to do in Bein Hashmoshes. Well, Moshe, let's say if someone has to make an Eitiv Tafshilin, and he didn't make the Eitiv Tafshilin, and it's still Bein Hashmoshes, so he can make an Eitiv Tafshilin. So because by Bein Hashmoshes, in Friday night, Issa D'Rabbanan with Tzarech Mitzvah is mutter. Now the next simon is an interesting thing. He says about the Ein Rishbech as a Mayim Mipnei Ames V'lei Mipnei Hatkufa. There was a din that if somebody passed away, and the din is that the houses next to it, I think 3 houses, I think the din is. So if they hear that a mess that died, they have to pour out the water. Today it doesn't apply because that was only talking about water that was in a pail that was exposed. Today the water is not exposed. The water is in the pipe, so there's no Huh?
People have drinking water. People have bottles of water.
It could be a shayla. I'm not going to say it's a closed bottle. I'm not going to go, but also in Nayat Kufa, there are 4 Tekufas, there are 4 seasons. And during the Zman of the Tekufa, it's a sakona to drink water that was exposed, b'shasta was a mess. So he says that this doesn't apply to this water from the Mayim Shelonu. Shenem Hashem b'mitzvah v'yeda dovera. In fact, some rely on that by the Indian of not making kiddush between 6 and 7. Lubavitch is very much machmar on it because they doubt that ever brings it, but the Welt is not machmar on this thing, and they rely on this pasuk Shema Mitzvah Yeda Davara. That's their reason. If he knows the time of the tkufa, that you have to look up in certain calendars. Astronomical calendars that will tell you is Yaniach B'techa Mayim Chaticha Basel Cotton V'nokin. So you put a piece of metal into the water, and that protects you that it wouldn't affect the water. Kimori Machat. It could be a piece of like a needle. Doesn't the size of the metal doesn't matter. We hate Tolu b'Machat Shrei Starech Achakach Ahachnas Asayad. V'techa Mayim Glikach Oisai El Yimshecho Im Hachut. I don't know what maybe it shouldn't come to schita. What you put your hand in, or the yeah. Okay. Now that we finished the Mayim, we write about the fowl. We write about the water. So we go to the next siman of din halisha v'afiyas hamatzah. The din of lisha is the knetten, the making the dough, and the baking of the matzah. Uboy tells us, Tana shofa b'chametz kishreitz lefes by matzahs tzorach achshir ayidei libum ba'ar. You have to kasher the oven. By us, it's not really a problem because in Morgenzeiten, it was the same baker that made the bread during the year, made the matzah for Pesach. So his oven was chomazdah. So you had to kasher the oven. Today, the bakery is only for Pesach. So, but from that thing, they always do kasher every time between shifts even. They spread out the coal over the floor of the oven, and that's the way you kasher it. Dahainu lasik akokach at sheyiu mitzoises nitzabimenu. This is called liben gomer. Liben gomer means that it becomes so red that sparks begin to jump from it. Kibapochas mizeh, if you do it less, we know there's also such a thing as liben kal. Liben kal is where there's no sparks. It just becomes very hot that a tissue, if it's put to the back of it, will begin to burn a little bit. So as they said, kibapochas mizeh, they have a liben gomer. You have to see that the coal should cover the whole floor of the oven. You have to clean it out. After the hesek, after you do this kashering, you should wait with using the oven. And to wait till it will cool off a little bit. And then later he'll bring it to heat he needs. Now, what's the idea over here? The idea what he's saying of is that in order to bake matzah, the oven has to have a certain heat. But it can't be the heat that you have when you kasher the oven. Because that heat when you kasher the oven is so hot that as soon as you put the matzah in the air of the oven, it'll begin to burn. So therefore, now we want to make sure that the one who's kashering the oven will do it the right way. So if we say that right after you kasher the oven, you can start baking matzah, you know what he's going to do? He will not kasher it with the full heat that you need for kashering. So therefore, the halacha is that being that we want him to have the right heat for kashering and to be able to have the right heat later for baking, and he shouldn't cheat on the kashering on the cheshbon of the baking. So we say that b'shas it's kashering, you can't bake the matzah, but you can't even bake matzah after till it cools off. After it cools off, then you bring it to the heat that you need in order to kasher, in order to bake, and go on with the baking of the matzah.
So why the cleaning? Why cleaning?
What?
It waits until it cools off. But why
Not
to clean up? He said to wait and also clean up everything from before.
Not everything. He cleans it. He moves aside. He's good. It's called. Yeah, I'm told
The only reason is because we have chesed that he's going to cheat.
That's when he kashers in the bakery. You go there, like the Eshter Oven. People want the Eshter Oven. What's the Eshter Oven? Before the Eshter Oven, he spreads out everything over the whole floor, but he can't bake it. So you have to move everything aside and wait a little bit, and then just bring it to the heat that you need for baking.
How long is that? How much does that have to cool off?
You have homework to go tomorrow to the baker. Ask the Shiva. Okay, I'm not a Shiva. I never baked it. I never was a baker. Neither was my grandfather. Okay. He says over here, Yesh Noigim Latuach Esatana Bekak Chadasha. Again, this is, some don't even rely on kashering the oven. But what they do is, if this was an oven that was used for chametz, like I said, the baker in his oven, so they make a new floor to the oven. They put more like new tiles or new cement to the oven. That's what he's saying. Yesh neigim latuach azatana b'karka chadasha, kedei she'iloi yitztachu lachshirei ayidei hesek. In order that this way you don't have to kasher it at all, because it's a different floor already, and the bria that was in the old floor of the oven doesn't go through the covering that you're putting in. Shachamas habalur begagay ubekiraiso hu niflet ayidei libem meshel heves shemasikin lafias hamatzos. He's saying the chayre was good. You make a new floor, right? But you don't make a new. The oven has a floor, and it has also a top to it. So what about the chumash that got absorbed into the top? So he said that's no problem, because the chumash that's absorbed into the top is only zayah. It's only like sweat, like vapor that went up. He said, B'shas will bake the matzah in the new oven. As soon as you'll heat up the matzah, that'll come out already. It'll get burned from the heat of the coal on the floor of the matzah. But he says, uminig yafahu. It's a good minig if it was the baker's oven. But he says, that the thickness of the layer of cement should be like the thickness of a finger. Because it will come through. So being that it'll come through, so that's why it should have a thick. It doesn't apply to us today, because as I said, the matzah bakery is only used for matzah. It has no shaykhs with chametz. Okay, we'll stop over here.